Thanks for coming, everybody. My name's Wilbur, and you're in Battle Royale for the local development environments. I don't have to tell everybody to get up and move around. You're all ready to go, so let's get started. When I signed up for this presentation, it was the last minute. I was really on the fence if I was going to present anything or not, and I decided on this title. I thought, yeah, this is kind of captures it. But as you'll see in my presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about Docker as well, because I think the ecosystem for local development environment is more than just these three players. So I'm going to give you guys some more options and talk about those today. So let's get started. Who am I? I'm Wilbur Ince. I'm a local developer. I work with Electric Citizen part-time, and I work on my own part-time. I've been involved with the Drupal project for 12 years. My user ID is in the 24,000s. I didn't do a lot at the start, but I've been a local camp organizer, and I've been involved with this year's camp again. If anybody wants to be on our camp and be part of the camp organizers, we got plenty of room for you. I've been a total Drupal fanboy for the last 10 years. That's really, even that is too much to know, I think. So at Electric Citizen and on my own, I'm kind of a jack of all trades. So I do back end, I do front end, I do DevOps. I help people with a lot of websites and DNS issues and all that kind of stuff. And ergo, I don't do any of it very well. I know a little bit about everything. So
is that your marketing slogan? I don't do anything well.
Right. No, I think my marketing slogan is "We'll get it right the second time." So, so I'm going to give you the spoiler alert right now. I'm not going to tell you which one is the best. If anybody came to like to know which one to go and focus their attention on, you can leave now. So let's talk about what local development is, right? And how it's changed. So when we talk about local development, we want to be able to be building our website on our local desktop. We don't have to worry about messing up the server. We don't want to break things. We want to be able to do things locally that we know we can replicate that on the server, that it's going to behave exactly the same way. And that gets complicated because our web world has gotten complicated, much more complicated. From the old Drupal 6 days or Drupal 5 days, right? Things have really changed a lot, and that's changed how we have to go at local development environment, right? So, underlying our web server, right? We have Linux or Windows running a web server, right? We're using Apache or Nginx, MySQL, PHP. That gets complicated, right? Which PHP? How are you using MariaDB? A lot of times these things don't matter, but they can, right? And so we want to be able to replicate that. We want to replicate website services like Apache Solr, Redis, Varnish, because these are all strategies we're going to use on our website, and they're also going to affect how our website is working and how we want to test it locally to make sure that things are working right. Then it gets even more complicated, right? We used to write HTML and CSS, and now we're writing Sass, and we have to compile that. We're using compilers. We have, to run our website, we're using Composer. We have Drush. We have different versions of Drush that we have to deal with. Now the new one with 8 and 9 is going to be a big challenge for us. We're running Git. We're running SSH on our platform. And then our development teams, right, are not necessarily using, they might be using Windows machines, Mac machines, Linux machines. How about a survey? How many people here are, I'll do the easy one, Windows? There are some people running Windows, right? And, you know, it might be.
It used to be everybody.
It used to be everybody, right? Did everybody start on Windows? Anybody not start on Windows? Yeah, see, there's the minority, right? Joe, I think you said in your training you had, was it you that said that there was like 14, or was it Mike? There was 14 Macs, and there were a couple of Linux people, and there were no Windows people. So,
We had people running Windows, but had Ubuntu and a VM in Windows.
running inside. All right. So that whole environment, right? It's changed, right? It's just much more complicated, and we have just much more complicated server information, and then also we want everybody on the team that when we're working on a project, this is maybe where the big money comes in. When you're working on that project, you want to be able to spin somebody up on that project quickly. You don't want to have to spend hours and hours with them getting Dev Desktop, Acquia Dev Desktop running, or LAMP or WAMP, or however they're going to do that, and how things are different between your machine and my machine because I'm on Linux and you're on Mac or Windows. So all the things are complicated, right? I love this quote: the trouble with normal is it always gets worse, right? So it's going to get more complicated. And that's just the nature of the project. We're doing, I should have put the George W. Bush quote up, right? This is really hard. What we're doing is really hard. This is really big stuff that we're doing. It's Drupal 8 is way more complicated than it was with Drupal 7 or Drupal 6. So we talk about the old days. People would set up a local development environment with LAMP or XAMPP or Acquia Dev Desktop, right? Install it locally. It was great if you're a local developer, right? Or if everybody was in charge of their own machine. But as we work on more projects, right, that gets more complicated. Blues, right? We're onboarding people and we have multiple clients. So for myself, I work with Electric Citizen, and I'm kind of their man Friday, that I work on all the projects and I do updates and I do all kinds of things. So I have all the websites on my machine, and I have all my projects that I'm working on. So I think we can look here and see how many projects I have. Is it going to tell me? 25 items. So I have about 25 local development environments on my machine right now. That's a lot of things to be able to pick those up. Not everybody's probably in that kind of an environment where you work on another project, but for me it's really important that I be able to spin websites up and have different technology to do that. So then the next thing we went to, the not so old days, right, is that the answer was Drupal VMs, right? So we build everything into a big container, and we can use that, and then we can give that container to the next person, and they can work on it. So it's consistent, and we can customize that thing, but the problem is it's huge, and it's hard to maintain that thing, right? And also you need to get people up on running on VM so that on their different environments. So now we come to the age of Docker, right? And what is Docker? It's small containers that we string together to create the service that is that local development environment. So those containers are lightweight and swappable, right? And we can add and configure those as we need them for our various projects. And then we can use that across platforms. And then that's customizable with that code, right? So that instead of having to deal with servers, we're just dealing with like YAML files or something where we can go in and customize that, and then we have a consistent interaction with it. So here's the projects that I want to talk about a little bit. We'll start with Tessa's project, Flight Deck. I kind of tried to arrange these in order of, complexity, let's say, or difficulty and complexity. So Flight Deck, Docker for Drupal, which has been around for a while, that's still viable. Then the projects that I talked about, Lando, Ddev, and Doxil. And then another one that I found that I'm not going to talk about, but that you might want to look at, which is Lagoon. Has anybody messed with that at all? Anybody know about that project? from what I gather, I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but it's a solution that you can you work with to create your own containers. And so you're starting basically and saying, I want a Docker solution, and I'm not going to use anybody else's containers. I'm going to build my own containers. And you go out and you run through their thing and create these containers, and then you have those available for your team. And they're completely customized from the start. That comment at the bottom, I didn't know where to put it in, so I just put it in right here, because every project that you look at on the issue queue, anywhere they can put it, they say, really, read the documentation. And I'm going to tell you a whole bunch of things today, and you guys have a lot of information too, and we all know that we have to read the documentation, and even that might not be enough. You're going to have to find out from other people what these things are going on. But read the documentation. They're really trying to make that your source for information. So, as I look across the room here, I see a lot of familiar faces, and I said this was a beginner session. And how many people would say that they're beginners? All right, nice. This talk really is, I'm not hedging here, but this talk really is about beginners, because I feel like I'm a beginner too, because we're all trying to figure this thing out, and I think as a community that seems to be the process too, right? That this is something that we're trying to evolve and make better. So whenever we start on this, we start with Docker, right? And so on your local environment, there's two options. There's a community edition and the enterprise edition. And I've never used the enterprise edition. I always use the community edition, and it's everything that I need. It's completely functional. I don't know, anybody have any comments about that? Anybody use enterprise edition? Nobody. Wow.
I have a client which uses it.
And what does it get them?
That's a good question. Mostly a lot of multi-server, multi-node swarm integration, which most people don't even care about for local development. It's
Yeah.
not significant at all. Unless they're doing Docker in production, you just need the community edition and nothing else.
Yeah. I maybe support that you can call somebody and
Yeah,
cry on the
exactly.
phone. Right? Okay. All right, so that's, you go out and get Docker and you install it on your machine. There's different versions of it for different environments. So here they give you the description of it. Where did I go here? There we go. And then, of course, here's the install document. That runs you through your different platforms. From here, there's a lot of links. So, all right. So let's start with a little evaluation of them. The first one I'm going to talk about is Flight Deck, and that's by Tess. I was a big fan. She originally did, was it Docs? Flight?
It was DocStack until we renamed it.
DocStack.
Like that.
So we shouldn't even say that. We'll just call the new one Flight Deck, which is much more awesome name. And so let's take a look at her project a little bit.
It does 6 too. It does Drupal 6.
It does Drupal 6, okay?
It's the only one which tends to.
Actually, a lot of these will do Drupal 6. They're, because they drew 6 and 7 the same. So if we get on my feet, oh, that's not me. Sorry. I was gonna do that in the who am I, and I forgot. All right. Here we go. Now we can see the files. So really, the heart of the matter here is that we really just need 2 files to make this run, and a directory. She does the backup directory for the databases, and then we have this composer file, right? So this is the heart of really where things get started, right? With all these projects, is you're building some kind of a Docker file, and Tess just pulls this out. She creates some volumes with it, If you go down and look at this file, this is for the new people, right? Is that you declare services, and those services are going to be running the containers that you're running, right? So here's the web service, and this is the container that's going to be running that. Can you guys see that okay? 10.7 flight deck, that's going to be the container that gets called by this service. And this is how Docker puts these things together and kind of connects them up. And so we can pick which containers we want to use and which ones are running on our setup. So if we look at this file, we see we're running the web server, we're running the database, we're running Memcache, we're running PHPMyAdmin, we're running MailHog. Do I need to explain what all these are? Memcache, we know about that. PHPMyAdmin is just an admin tool that we can look at databases on the MySQL server. MailHog is just a program that intercepts email on anything that's generated by the website gets interrupted by that, and we can see the emails that get generated by that. And so it's a way for us to debug email functions off the website. Here we have Solr that's disabled, so this would be a Solr server. The next couple lines, we can install Varnish. I don't know what WebGrinder is.
It's for Xdebug Profiler. This has Xdebug out of the box as well.
Got it. So, and there you have it, right? It's kind of, what I like about this is that it's exactly what you need, right? To really get a lot of stuff done. Xdebug, you got the MailHog, right? A person can do a lot of development with this. It's simple, it's right there, it's laid out. There's not that much layer to it. The only other side of it is this envelope file. And that's where we set some common sense parameters, right? Here we say if it's Drupal 7 or Drupal 8. We have the Drupal password in username. Database credentials, root directory, debug. So you see, you just have a couple of things that you can turn on and off here and some values, right? So another thing about Tessa's installation of this is that she uses containers built on Alpine rather than Ubuntu. And those Alpine containers are very small. And so if you're worried about size, right, and performance, that's one thing that these containers are really small. What's the size? Is it about?
Largest container is about 216 megabytes.
So about 1/3, 1/4 the size of?
Yeah, I think the Ubuntu default container is at least 400 megabytes, and that's before you install anything else on it.
Yep. The other thing is that a lot of these containers also, Composer is installed.
Composer, Drush, Drupal console, and Node.js, Compass if you still have any Compass stuff, Sass with Sass blobbing. We build all the tools right into the container. So
Yep.
You can start off with a clean system, put Flight Deck on it, boom, you got your dev stack and all your tools.
Right. So I like it that it's really an efficient system, right? It's just what you need and as small as possible and kind of all set up in a simple way here.
Where do you get that?
I put a link for it to Flight Deck's GitHub and the docs on hashtag TCDrupal on the Twitter channel.
Whoops. Where'd I go? There's the URL. Can you read that? It's a little hard on my screen. Yep. If you look up 10.7 Flight Deck, you'll find it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Let's talk about the next one. Oops. Docker for Drupal. So this has been around a while. It is. Sorry. Very similar approach to tests, just a little more laid out, a lot more things there, because there's a lot. This is understandably a little bit bigger project. It's been around for a while, and so they've really developed a lot of this stuff, and it's well used by a lot of people. So here's how they lay out their envelope file. There we go. So in here we're going to define a project. We define the base URL that we're going to use. Database settings. And then here we can pick, in the envelope file rather than in the Docker Compose file, now we can pick, kind of customize those containers that we're going to use on our project. And so here we have MariaDB. We can pick different versions of that. Here we pick our Drupal version. So we're going to use Drupal 8 with PHP 7.1. And just by changing these parameters is how we change to different versions of Drupal running on our project. Same with PHP. We do these in tandem with the Drupal tag. This project uses Nginx instead of Apache, so we set it up there. You can set up Solr, Elasticsearch, Kibana, Redis. You got Node, Postgres, and then you got a bunch of other options at the bottom. All right. If we look at their Docker Compose file, really, there's not much that you would change in here. This is all set up and it runs on that envelope file. All right. Let's take a quick look through this. So again, we see this layout, right? You recognize these YAML file layouts. So you have your services. Here's our MariaDB, PHP. Here we're doing the web server. There's Mailhog. And then here's all your other services that you can turn on. So you can turn on Apache and turn off Nginx if you want. It's got Varnish. It's got Redis. It's got AdMiner is an equivalent of PHP MyAdmin. There's PHP MyAdmin enabled. Solr, all these other services. So, and then I'm going to actually start this one up because this is the service I thought was really makes this compelling, is this Portainer. So let's, I cannot type while I can't talk while I type. Okay, so we're all configured. Let's get this started. Docker. You know, when you're presenting, you lose about half your brain function. No, you're just like.
Yeah, that's a well-known phenomenon.
What I need to do is make really like a big mistake and like have just black screen, and then I'll be able to get into this. So let's get this up. Docker Compose up. And this will start my project. And there we are, we're ready to go. So let's take a look at that here. What was that URL? Shoot.
Should I give you a local host address or something?
Somebody help me, yeah. What would my local host be here?
Set it in the environment. You want those.
Oh, yeah, you're right. There it is.
We just did
Thank you.
I do that when I forget what the URL is.
I've been churning this presentation, and so I'm a little fried by this too. So,
You're doing good.
all right, thank you. So, all right, what did I do wrong here? Oh, there we go. There we go. So there we have our Drupal website up and running, right? We can run through this and is it Drupal? Yeah, so with not a lot of effort, we're able to take the environment file, the envelope file, pull this together. I think I put a copy of the database here. And
So you get to initialize your database before, right? But
yeah, actually, what I'm running here is there's two versions for Docker for Drupal. One is it sets up a vanilla instance of Drupal for you to try out, and there's no like file directory there. It's just running it. It pulls it down and runs it, and so it's not even. This isn't. It's like I'm not even running a development environment. I'm just sort of auditioning a version of Drupal right now. All right. Let's take a look at that on the Docker page. And so again, everything is about the docs. And here, if you do the quick start, it talks about running a vanilla version of Drupal, and that's what we're doing right now, as opposed to running my own code base of Drupal. All right? Any questions about that? Everybody good? Keep going? All right. Let's talk about the next one. So just a couple of things. Sorry, I'll finish my slide here. Pros, right? It's pretty robust. It's got a lot of different options for us to configure, and those are readily, easily available, just getting at those with a couple of files. Lots of services, only a couple of files. Let's look at that portainer. That's what I wanted to look at. Sorry. So if we go to our website, and now we go to this URL. Have people ever seen this before? Anybody played with this? It's pretty funky because it tells you, it gives you information about everything running on the website. So here's all my containers that are running as part of this project that I just spun up. It gives me information, it tells me what those are. And then you can see in this pages and pages how many different containers I have set up on my machine. So these are the running ones, sick web. Now I have all these other ones that are different environments that I have installed on my machine. You can see it gets to be a lot of containers on here. Got the images, starting and endpoints. I think there's also anybody use this app template? This is something that I just happened across, and I am totally interested in this. You have all these different products, And it looks like you're able to spin one of these up. So, nobody knows about that? All right. Put that on your list, Portainer. It's part of the Docker for Drupal installation.
You can also download it completely separately and just run it with Docker.
That's what I got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be installed as part of your stack. You can just go to portainer.io and download it and just run it with Docker.
All right.
So yeah, you can get it now and it'll tell you.
There's your hot tip. All right. Thank you. Okay. So one of the cons about Docker for Drupal is that it's really set up for Drupal. I'm sure you could set up a hosted website, but it's really set up for Drupal right now. So if you want to try and run a little WordPress site or something, this isn't probably the tool to do it. Let's talk about Lando. So those first two were really in the Docker world. And now we're going to tools that have a bunch of functionality layered on top of Docker. And so we work a lot less with Docker, and we really work more with this custom tool that's developed to give us this. So with Lando, it provides us a lot of options and a lot of recipes for creating our local hosting instances. And it makes it very easy for us to do that. It also provides GitHub and Pantheon authentication. So we get machine tokens from those two services, and we use those, and through Lando, we authenticate ourselves, and then we can interact with those services. So we can go and look at, for example, with Pantheon, you'll have your Pantheon account, you'll put in your authentication token, and now you can go and say, okay, I have this website set up and it's a Pantheon account. Go ahead and pull the database, and it'll run you through an interactive process and update that for you. I think of all the projects, this one has the best documentation. Anybody want to challenge me on that?
Drupal VM.
Drupal VM has better documentation. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at some Lando work here. Oh shoot, I gotta look at my notes. I just switched over to do this with one screen. Where are my notes? Oh, not that. Notes. Come on. All right. So this is a project we already have started. One thing I really like about Lando, I gotta stop somebody here.
Do you still have the other Docker running that you
Yep.
showed us a little before?
Where Portainer comes in handy. Kill the services with Portainer.
Oh, I still have it running. Do I kill the containers?
Yeah, so you still have have those running so you can go in and kill the ones you want. Just stop.
Oh, that stopped my own container. Whoops, 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 shoot.
I think you had still a couple of those running.
What do I have running? Doxil. Anybody got a tip for me? Sorry.
I was just Google stop all containers.
Yeah, you
oh,
just restart Docker.
Okay, so Docker space kill backtick Docker ps-q backtick. Docker ps. 2 words, not 1. Docker space ps.
Yep.
-q backtick. Goodbye.
Nice.
Make sure you bring tests next time you do this presentation.
All right, so what's happening? We have a website instance, and we're starting Lando. While that's going on, let's take a quick look at that project. So, here's my website. I have a Lando file. Why can't I see it? There it is. All right. So Lando has created its own YAML file for this project. So it's interacting with Docker and and this kind of takes the place of your Docker Compose file now. So we give our project a name. It has this recipe, which we're using. It's a Pantheon recipe. And now from there, we can basically configure everything. So we can set up a project with just a few lines, but now we can modify everything. So here it's talking about our Drupal install at Pantheon. It has our framework, what the site name is on Pantheon, the site ID, if it's using Xdebug, and then it's updating our services. So these services would run even if they weren't in this file, but when we put it in here, now we can override those values. And so what we do on here is when we start this app server, we're going to give it a build command. So whenever we build it, it's going to make a directory for site aliases, and then it's going to make a link from our project alias file into the container file. So that now we have that alias from the Pantheon aliases for the live site are actually available on your local build. All right. We also define a bunch of events. And here you can see that we created some commands to, the first one starts on db import. So anytime we run the db import command, afterwards it's going to run all these commands and prepare our local environment for getting ready. And so you see we download stage file proxy, we enable devel module, we change the username and password, we enable devel, we enable stage file proxy, we do the dblog, and then we set the stage file proxy URL. And then at the bottom we have pull, so whenever we run the Lando pull command, now we're going to run pretty much those same steps. And then the last one here, we can also do some commands on push. So unlike, or in addition to the Docker options that we have, this really gives us some hooks that we can really make our installation of this into a workflow, so that it's not just setting up your local environment, but it's getting you ready and getting that local environment ready for you to work, so that now it's ready to go. Oh, what happened here? Wow. Let's just turn that off, huh? There we go.
Wilbur, are these all defaults, or did you actually add something to that as well? Because I've never looked at that file. If you say Lando init Pantheon, it does all of that automatically, right?
It just does a couple of lines at the top. I don't know that I have one that I could show you right off the bat, but
It really just includes the top piece.
just the very top piece. All these are overrides.
I thought the Lando pull and Lando push are only available with the Pantheon.
That's
recipe,
correct.
Right?
Yep.
But I've never done anything like this, but I just use Lando pull or push.
Yes, and well, these, whenever it's in this file, these are all overrides. So this adds additional functionality on top of Lando pull and Lando push.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So now on yours, it just pulls the database and it says,
Yes.
now I'm ready.
Yeah.
On mine, it says, I pulled it and now I'm going to show the Drush version and now I'm going to do all that module manipulation so that I'm ready to start developing when I
Okay, so
do
that. That you got out of the documentation. Because I've never read it. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, the documentation gives you just a little bit, and then we went crazy because these are the steps that we set up because we want to be able to. We used to have a script. The genius of Tim Brooker, who I work with at Electric Citizen, he created an old script that was very command line, and it was called Joshua, and Joshua would go through and even gave you audio prompts. Shall we play a game? It would go through and it would ask you which environment you wanted to pull down, if you wanted to pull the database, if you wanted to pull the files, and at the end of that process, you would have your local development environment ready to go, really with the modules that you want, you know, completely changing live into a local development environment. So we can see right from this that Lando is really giving us, oh my gosh, look at the time. Lando's really giving us a lot of customization, and like I say, a local workflow that we can really customize our process for our users. All right. Any questions about Lando? I use Lando the most, and I really like it because this scripting language is pretty good. The only gripe I have about it is that the command line is a little bit glitchy, and I'm kind of a command line purist, so I want to be able to paste in 4 or 5 different commands and have them run and then have them queued up. But when you do Lando commands, you put them in and it just does the first one and it forgets the other ones. They go away. I don't know. Anybody know about that? All right. Okay. Let's talk about DDev. Easy to configure and install. Also has recipes for different platforms. It generates a Docker Compose and a config file. It has Pantheon integration. Let's take a look at the documentation of that. So here you have installation instructions.
Is this from Acria or? Is it
Who's the company? Is it Tandem?
DRUD.
Drud. Yep.
Oh, I see.
Oh boy. I should have practiced my slides a little better. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, I'm drawing a blank. How do I start? DDev. There we go.
DDev start should go, but we config first, or? I can probably help, I can't read your red arrow.
Oh, okay.
It's highlighted.
Even worse. All right.
Do it Docker PS.
It says failed to start project. A project web container in exited state already exists for Wilbur.
Do you have two projects that are both called Wilbur DDev? Is that possible?
Your DDev list, and that'll tell you what you've done.
DDev listable.
Oh, sure. Here. I got it. So this is, I did find this out, is that I have aliases in the htdocs directory, and that is a link to my home directory, and so you have to define one or the other, and you have to be in the right spot. It doesn't like the alias. Strange, huh? Okay.
Now the Lando's still running.
I thought I shut Lando down here.
Lando power off.
Thank you. Oops.
One more.
Yep.
No, I didn't know that. Just Lando power off. What's that?
That's something to note about all these things. A lot of them run into each other, right? It's going to be listening to ports on your machine, so you're going to need to be clear about how you interact if you have multiple instances on here, and how you switch back and forth, and how you turn these things on and turn them off. All right? All right, so let's take a look at this project. We don't have much time yet, huh? So DDev creates a couple of different files. It does things just a little bit differently. Here it's going to show you the config file. So it's just the API version, the name of our container, what kind of instance it is. I set my PHP version here, my ports, all right? And then it builds this Docker compose file for you, all right? So again, we see that same format. And we can update this, but when I set this up, I just did the ddev config, and it ran this file, and it looked at it. It gave me a bunch of common sense. It looked at the files and said, yeah, this looks like a Drupal 7 site. It gave me that as the option. So I went through that. It was very easy to set this up from an existing website. So let's keep going. Just have one more, and that's Doxil. All right? So Doxil does the same thing, but instead of just running those containers, it's running the containers inside a VM. And I'm running Linux, but what that really provides Mac users is much faster support, because that Drupal VM, or that VM file that these containers are in, are going to be in native format. And that makes the file access to those much faster. So one of the big issues with Docker containers with Macs is that this native file format. One of the other projects, there's a, is it DocStack, MacStack? No. There's another technology that one of the projects is using to try and alleviate some of the speed issues with this. But this one works as creating these, like I say, these VMs that are much faster access. And the problem with it's exacerbated when there's more files, and Drupal has a lot of files, especially Drupal 8. When you're installing and running a Drupal 8 website, it's reading a lot of files. And so this tool on Macs compared to the other ones is considerably faster. This is a problem that everybody knows about and they're working on, and I think, Mike, did you say that they're talking about going away from the VM approach? And the problem is really on kind of Docker to try and solve the performance issues with the file system. Tess, you have?
It's Apple's file system, that's the problem.
What's that?
It's Apple's file system, which is the problem.
Yeah.
That's what Docker themselves have been fighting all this time.
All right. We just have a couple minutes left. I'm going to open it up to questions. Yeah.
Besides the Pantheon integration, is there significant difference between any of these in terms of how, once you're done doing local development and want to make it live, the steps you have to take?
Sure.
If I remember correctly, off the top of my head, Lando is the only one that has semi-official support for that. I know Lagoon is specifically designed to do
Yep.
production work as well. Flight Deck is probably about 80% ready for production. We need to do some more scripting and hardening. We did create a custom set of containers for a client that is running in production right now based on Flight Deck.
Yep.
So it can be done.
The people behind Docker for Drupal
They do it live too.
would be. That's kind of their business model, is that they provide Docker for Drupal, and then they also provide a service that you can take your, you can build your containers with, it's Woodby, W-O-D-B-Y, and you set up your containers and your information there, and you use that to push your changes to a live site. So you're basically creating your live site as you create your local environment.
Well, if you use Lando with Pantheon, with the push and pull, you basically have a direct connection to your development instance, right?
Yep.
So you're directly tied into this whole workflow.
That's right. And there's also a GitHub authentication, so you can also authenticate back and forth with GitHub. So,
How flexible is all these systems for transferring from one hardware system to another hardware system, going from Intel to ARM ASF?
That's the whole beauty of these projects, is that once you get on your machine, when you get Docker running and Lando running, I can give you a project and you can run it just like I do on your machine. I'm running Linux, you're running Windows, you're running Mac.
ASF has to have all this stuff compiled, most of the stuff isn't compiled.
Yeah, that's actually correct. None of these are going to support non-Intel platforms out of the box. I might be able to get Flight Deck to work on ARM. I just haven't tried it yet.
Yeah.
So all the like CI tools, CI/CD stuff, does similar like YAML, Docker orchestration. If you're using one of those tools, would you set all that up separate and then have those sync with your Lando or Doxil or whatever? Or do you just can you just run these tools in those and say, do what I do locally every next
I don't know the answer to that.
I if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It really depends on the kind of hosting that you already have going. If you already have a legacy system that already has hosting on it, a traditionally managed cluster or even an automated cluster, generally you just want to keep the containers away from it, because to deploy containers in production is a major shift from an ops perspective. And honestly, I wouldn't use any of these systems by themselves in production. I would be looking at Kubernetes and then rebuilding the containers so that they would work specifically for production and have scaling. A lot of these containers are going to be developer specific to make it easy to work for developers, which comes with a lot of security, risky configurations. So you've got to be careful about that kind of thing. It's a learning process.
I'm even thinking more just like running the tests out on the CI server, not necessarily having that then deploy like a Lando.
I think you could probably do that. I don't see why you couldn't have Travis or Circle CI or GitLab CI spin up a series of containers and then run the tests from there. I know that I do that kind of sort of with another module developer specific project of mine called Drupal, and that runs all the core tests internally in an automated fashion.
There was a recent blog post about using the GitLab CI, which is Docker based, so that you could use your local dev that is container based, push it up through GitLab and have it spin up all the Docker containers you need to run all your tests. Because that's integrated into GitLab, either as the hosted service in the cloud or on your local self-hosted environment.
Yep. Great questions. It gets so much more complicated from here. So, thanks everybody for coming. Any other questions? All right. Have a great camp. Thank you.